community and the people of our community, we will have this opportunity to get to know one another, inspire one another, and just being out there for our community to know, and also to bridge cultures and reach out to the non-Filipino community. In Calgary alone, we have 50,000 Filipinos living and working in this beautiful city. Across Alberta, it is estimated that we have about 150,000 Filipinos. All over Canada, this is a home to 750 Filipinos working and living in this beautiful country. And so tonight, it is such a pleasure to have with me one of the most active community leaders that we have here in Calgary. And we have seen how our community, as Filipino-Canadian community here in Calgary, has evolved into a very vibrant, dynamic community. And so tonight we'll talk about community leadership. We'll talk about some community initiatives and all these great things that we can learn from one another. So join us in our conversation. Comment on the link below as we continue with our interview. Without further ado, help me welcome my guest for tonight. He is a public servant, a social innovator, and an entrepreneur. Friends, help me welcome Mr. Fernando Cala. Good evening, Pando. Can I call you Pando?
Sure, yes.
All right, so thanks for joining us tonight, and it's really a pleasure to have you on this segment, Community Perspective.
Well, thank you, Jerry, and good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I know I've been dodging this for a long time, but we found a day and a time that works for both of us.
Yes, I think it's
happy to be here.
Yes, it's a perfect time for us to start talking about really what matters to us and to our community. So before we do that, can you briefly tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Any fun fact that you want our audience to know about you?
Any fun fact? I'm actually just a very boring person. I've been living in Calgary with my family since 2008.
Okay.
So I've been married for almost 24 years. And I have my wife and I have 2 kids. Both of them are now in university. And fun fact, I used to be a DJ.
Wow.
So
DJ. So we have a DJ in the house here. So this is when you were in college or in high school or after college?
we started off in the Philippines. There was I grew up in the 80s.
Okay.
Right. So the 80s was the party decade. Right. So everyone was having fun, doing parties here and there. And some of my friends and I decided to put together a mobile disco.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
So we started spinning in parties and all of that. So,
oh, wow. Yeah, that's... where did that come from? I mean, I read your profile and I didn't see this coming. But anyway, that's really fun fact about you. So before we talk about really important aspects in terms of community leadership in bringing our community together and just being part of this greater Canadian society, let me first ask you, I know you're such a very busy person, and I know that though your kids are pretty much grown up, they have their own lives and pretty much independent, and this is what we call you're already past the awkward stage, unlike those who are still pretty much, having young kids to take care at home. So that makes you really very busy in terms of, being a community leader, just doing so many great initiatives. What is a typical day like for you?
A typical day for me is, I wake up regularly around 6 or so, and I spend maybe a few minutes just lying there and thanking God for a new day, right? A new opportunity to do something good, to make things right, and then I sort of reflect on what the day is gonna look like.
Okay.
And then I have this 8-minute physical routine.
Okay.
That sort of like helps pump the blood, into my sleepy body. Then I just have breakfast. I have breakfast sometimes with my daughter, who's going to Mount Royal, and so we have a quick chat or so.
Mm-hmm.
My wife leaves for her office quite early, and so I take my daughter to the bus stop or to the train station for her to catch her bus going to the university.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will go wherever my schedule goes. Right?
Oh.
So I would go to a meeting, or I'd go straight to the office, and that's how my day rolls. When I get home, sometimes I pick my wife up in the office. We go home together. We chat about our day,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have dinner with our daughter. Relax a bit, do some reading,
Mm-hmm.
and prepare for the next day. Pretty boring stuff.
Wow, sounds to me like a very structured, but I know that different families have different dynamics.
That's right.
And kind of how they start their day and end their day.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing that to us. Anyway, so let's start with some questions that will bring you back to the times you were outside or you were not here in Canada yet.
Okay.
So I've read in your profile that you've lived in different countries and about
right.
4 or 5 continents.
That's right.
And coming from a background where you have a really very strong educational attainment coming from a very reputable school in the Philippines, and having this international experience of working in international organizations, my very first question to you: why did you decide to migrate to Canada after living in this 4 different countries, 5 different continents, then different countries, and working with different international organizations? And also, you've also served the Philippine government. So,
That's right.
what was the reason why you migrated to Canada? Maybe this is a question that a lot of people may want to know, because I've been asked also many times. But
Yeah.
how much more, maybe with your background?
Well, it's a good question, and my reason is not unique.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about the family.
Mm-hmm.
So you always look out for what's best for your children, and we felt that Canada presented an opportunity for us to develop, for our kids to grow up and pursue their own opportunities in life as well. And so working in many different places allowed me to really understand the different perspectives of different cultures, people coming from different backgrounds. Right? And Canada as a country has embraced multiculturalism as a value. In fact, it's a law.
That's
right?
As part of our law of the land.
That's right.
That's right.
And I felt that I'd like my children to grow up in a place wherein multiculturalism is welcomed, encouraged, because that's what I was exposed to when I was going around, when I was living in different countries, and I want my children to appreciate that, to understand and be comfortable in them being Filipinos, but open enough to embrace different cultures, understand different cultures, and to work with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I think Canada is a great country for that. It's a great platform for them to appreciate that. And from there, it's up to them.
That's right.
They can decide not to live here. They can decide to live in other places. But I'm not encouraging that, of course. No, I'm encouraging that, but of course you have to let them go.
That's right.
And find their own path.
Yeah, one thing I love about Canada as an immigrant to this beautiful country is that you really have this sense of accomplishment, or this opportunity where everyone has equal chance for success. Like, there are a lot of opportunities for people who come and be a part of the greater Canadian society. But I remember this survey many years back in our country. There are thousands of Filipinos who leave the country for work, or those who would leave the country to migrate to another country, work and live there. And there was a year, I forgot the year, that the number of immigrants actually outnumbered the number of temporary foreign workers. And as I have also personally experienced here in Calgary alone, I have seen so many people like Pando, me, and so many other people who have really actually accomplished so many things in career, in business, or even in other countries, who have chosen to come to Canada and be a part of this great country. And we have seen that in so many, communities, and not only in the Filipino community, but also with other non-Filipino communities. So I do understand where you're coming from, but before we continue to talk about community leadership and what we need to do for us to continue to build our community, let's talk first about your experience as a public servant in the Philippines. It's always our pride and honor to serve our country. Even a lot of us here who have lived in Canada, we always have this really strong ties back to our home country, not only in terms of sending money to our families and helping the economy of the Philippines, which is actually 10% of the gross domestic product, which is a very big chunk of the income of our country comes from overseas remittances.
That's right.
But we really have this deep sense of connection to our country. So tell us about your experience as a public servant serving for the export industry in the Philippine government.
Well, thanks for that question, Jerry. So I had the privilege of serving the Philippine government. Particularly in, I worked for the Department of Trade and Industry, and we oversaw the export sector. And so that was a very good experience for me, because it was my first time to work in government.
That's right.
And in working in government, your stakeholder base is the entire country, right? In our case, we were working with our stakeholders, were the exporters as well as the importers from other countries, right? And so that experience allowed me to see the government at work, right? And maybe many of us have that perception that maybe government is inefficient, right? But contrary to that, I've had the privilege to have worked with high-level professionals who are dedicated to serving our country. And many of them, if they decide to, probably would have a very fruitful career in the private sector, but they choose to serve the country. So there was it was that time wherein the president, who was Arroyo at that time, wanted to develop the export sector and make it grow to double-digit growth, expansion. Right? And so one of the biggest mandate that we had was to grow the sector as per the direction of the president. And I was lucky enough to be part of a very dynamic team in what was then the International Trade Group, which was led by a very dynamic undersecretary. And coming from the private sector, so let me premise that by saying that the improvements that we did in the export sector, I was just a small cog in a big machinery.
That's right.
And the achievement was a collective one. It was the collective leadership of the people who are involved. That's right. in the export sector. And so coming from the private sector, I think the value add that I was able to provide was a different perspective as to how things could be done.
That's right.
And I think that would be in any organization, when you bring one person in coming from a different sector, what you value most would be that person's perspective.
That's right.
And say, you start to look at things differently, because if you've been in the system for a while, you seem to be doing the same things all over, right? And so we were actually a team from many from the private sector that injected that new perspective.
Yeah.
And so we were able to sort of rev up that engine, over the next few years. We saw the export starting to grow at 11%.
Wow.
Right? So that was the time when I gave myself 3 years to do that, but I extended for 1 more year because my role sort of like expanded into national competitiveness. And it was a sort of like a natural progression, because if you want your export sector to be competitive, then every portion of that, everything that contributes to that export product should be competitive as well. And so that's how the focus on national competitiveness sort of like transitioned.
Yes.
Right?
Thanks for sharing that. And I do agree with you that the export sector is a very important driver to drive the economy, and that needs to be taken care of. And your contribution seems to me have really played a very important role in increasing the competitiveness of the export industry in the Philippines. And one thing that I was actually my attention was caught when you mentioned about diversity, because living in a multicultural country like Canada, diversity is pretty much the strength of our country. And even in the Philippines, because we are composed of so many islands, we have so many regions, we have 3 major islands. Diversity is also very, very common in terms of working together in a workplace or in a community. And I do believe that diversity has really it's very important to be able to celebrate each other's uniqueness and just leverage each other's strengths.
That's right.
And that is very important, especially living in a very diverse society like Canada. Thanks for bringing that out, because I'm able to talk about the importance of diversity, the strength in diversity.
That's
which we all know, which is very important in this country. Anyway, you've also worked in an international organization. You live in different countries. Tell us your experience about coming from the Philippines, serving the country, and now moving into an international organization, living in a different country. How was it like for you?
Well, working for an international organization came first, actually.
Okay.
And so we had when I say we, it's me and a group of friends and classmates. We found ourselves, let me backtrack a bit. So when we finished university, a group of my friends and some classmates, we got together and we put together an IT company.
Okay.
That taught software to students. And then we transitioned into doing programming. And that caught the eye of a consultant who happened to work for the United Nations, to pass a project on to us to develop the systems for the field offices of UNICEF at that time.
Okay.
Right? So that was the sort of like the opportunity that we found ourselves in, and we ended up being consultants for UNICEF.
Wow.
Developing systems for their field offices. And I'm gonna date myself because that was the time wherein nobody has heard of the internet.
Exactly.
Yet, right?
Yeah, that's my question actually. So, when was this? Like how many years was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Oh, there were many years ago. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, there's one thing really that I am very curious, because I know you have so many things to share about your international experience in this international organization, having live and learn new cultures and work with so many people from diverse background. And I know it's not hard for you to transition to coming to Canada. But also sometimes it becomes a hindrance, as we all know, for a lot of our foreign trained professionals, especially those who have the master's degree, who has this rich experience in their field, and coming to Canada and having to transition, not necessarily transition, but to find the kind of career that they have been trained for many years. I want to ask you personally, because this is a question that a lot of our foreign trained professionals maybe experience the same thing. How was your transition?
My transition was, I would say, relatively smooth, right? And so we came to Canada in 2008, but I settled in Canada in 2011. So those 3 years I was going back and forth between Canada and the Philippines, because I didn't actually leave my job there. And so fast forward to 2011, I decided that's not really helping me or my family, because they would just see me for like a week or two, and then I'm gone again. So that's not a good way to raise your family.
That's right.
And that wasn't the reason why we came to Canada. Right? And so my transition was quite not as rocky as our friends who are in different professions, because I was introduced to the Calgary Regional Immigrant Employment Council, or CRIAC.
That's
and
right.
I know that you're a mentor at CRIAC.
Yeah.
And so through CRIAC, I was able to meet mentors. I was able to network with people within the industry and understand what Calgary is about economically. And through those networking opportunities, one connection led to my joining a not-for-profit organization, which is the Immigrant Access Fund. And your question is actually related to what we did at the Immigrant Access Fund, because that organization provided microloans for immigrants who wanted to go back to their occupations in Canada. And so I was witness firsthand to the struggles of professionals coming in here and struggling to go back to their occupations in Canada. So there's still a lot of challenges that professionals may face, although seeing what has been improved bit by bit from that time to this time, there's still a lot of work. Right.
Thanks for sharing that, because to so many who are in the same path or journey, especially to our foreign trained professionals, I know there are so many things that you have to go through, but it has improved over the years, and there's always a lot of resources. There are always opportunities and access to funding and mentoring that you might need. Like, for example, as a mentor of the Calgary Region Immigrant Economic Council, I have mentored about more than 5 foreign trained professionals, and they are now working in their own fields. And through CRIAC, I was able to be a part of their journey, also understanding from my cultural perspective and my journey as an immigrant. So what I'm saying is there's always available resources for those who would like to pursue their career here in Canada. So now, you're also very active in community engagements, and we work with various organizations, helping organizations in our community. One thing that I want to ask you about our community, in terms of bringing our community together, in terms of building our community, what do you think do we need to do as community for us to continue to build our community. Because I know for one, we have some challenges or issues. We don't have time to discuss all these issues, but as in general, how do we support and build our community as part of the Filipino Canadian community?
I think what you're doing is great.
Thank you.
Forums like this connect us to each other, right? And so if we can get many more of these opportunities to connect each other within the Filipino community, that would be great.
That's right.
I think we just need to also take care of each other.
That's right.
There are many things that divide us, politics, our beliefs, right? But we also always have to remember that there are still a lot more things that unite us.
That's right.
So having that perspective in mind, you bring down the barriers of not being connected.
That's right.
So opportunities like this, Fiesta Filipino, especially a space or a place or an opportunity for the younger generation to actually appreciate their heritage is quite important, right? Because our kids will grow up, and so what we'd like to do is for our kids to retain that pride of being Filipino and be comfortable in that, in contributing to Canada.
That's right.
As a whole, right?
Yes.
So to answer your question, I think opportunities like this is great. What I would also like to advise is for Filipinos to go out there and be involved, right? Be involved not only in the Filipino community, but in other communities that you're passionate about, right? Sports, arts, education.
Yes.
Right?
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know that there are so many ways of bringing our community together,
right.
And as part of our community, as I've always said, that every member of our community is a very important fiber of a great community. That's why we have to participate. We have to go out and support any events. And also, we have so many organizations that maybe you can affiliate with, or you can support their advocacies. There's just so many platforms, not only the Filipino Champions of Canada, but all the other organizations in our community. And that's the reason why in this platform, we continue to highlight community organizations, our people in our community, so that we get to know one another. And there's really importance in human connectedness. If we are to build our community, number one is human connectedness. We have to increase that level of engagement within our community so that we can also be a better player in terms of building this great nation and becoming part of this greater Canadian society. And I've always been asked this question. I want to ask this question to you too.
Sure.
This is not that controversial, but there's always this question: why are we not united as a community? Before I answer that, maybe you should give us just a brief insight before we close our interview
Why
for tonight.
Why are we not united?
Are we not united, or to a certain level we are not, or a certain level we are united?
Well, I think at a certain level we are united.
Okay, I do agree.
We celebrate being Filipino. There are certain events that bring us together, but I think that we need to go beyond events.
That's right.
Right, and find every opportunity to connect and to listen.
That's right.
To each other, and so the different Filipino communities around the world. They already are moving towards celebrating Filipino heritage.
That's right.
Because as more Filipinos leave the country and reside in their new countries and their new homes, we are growing in number. Right? But I think what's important as well is, as I mentioned this earlier, is to involve our kids, right? Because maybe in the past we bring certain baggage, certain beliefs that may separate us, right? But the future generation, that's the hope, right? And if we're looking for a more unified community, we work with the younger generations, right? Because they're eager to really understand their identity, and they're eager to also collaborate with each other, not only in their own generation, but also the older generations, right? So
yeah. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that wonderful insight. I do agree with you. You know, there should be always this forum or platform where we can provide our younger generation the opportunity to get to know who they are. Cultural identity is very important if we are to build our community. And we are so blessed to be in this country that allows us to do that. That is mandated in our law of the land, that we can exercise and celebrate our culture, our heritage, our beliefs.
That's right.
That we will not get imprisoned or persecuted for what we believe in or what we stand for. So again, I want to just also add to the point where Pando had already said, where there's a sense of disconnect between our younger generation and the older generation, and we need to actually narrow the gap and bring this younger generation to a level where they have a really good cultural understanding of where they came from. And also going back to the question, why, if we are united or not, why we are not united, or at a certain level we are united. Yes, to a certain level we are united. And if we are to unite in general our community or even this great country, it takes hard work. It takes everyone to participate. And one of the things that we do personally and as part of the Filipino Champions of Canada, the Filipino Canadian Magazine, the FCM Live, our vision, we have this collaborative goal of bringing our community together. And the reason why we want to highlight our community and the people in our community, because I do believe that starts with connectedness. If we are connected,
that's right. Yeah.
we build a stronger foundation, we build relationship. And only when the time comes that we know each and everyone, maybe not 100%, but we have a really good understanding of who we are as a community, who are the people in our community.
That's true.
And everyone knows what this group is doing and what this person is doing. As we continue to highlight our community, as we continue to highlight community organizations and the amazing thing that they do, one day we'll come to that point where unity is not a problem, because we know each other, we have relationship, we are connected, and it's easy to continue to be a part of this great Canadian society where we can be an active contributor in building this country.
That's right. Right. I mean, it's a very good point that you mentioned, Jerry. And unity doesn't necessarily mean that we all agree on the same thing, but unity is understanding each other, even though we disagree. There's that respect to listen, to have conversations, and if there's anything that separates us severely, there's a space for us to work things out.
That's right.
And I think if we're able to do that, then we can say that we're unified.
That's right.
So,
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on this segment. I know we can talk and share so many insights, but we don't have much time. But I hope that you guys have learned from our discussion tonight. And just as a last statement for tonight, it is really important that as part of our community, it is our responsibility to take care of one another. That as a community, we need to lift up one another rather than diminishing one another. We need to be out there to support one another. And even if we have differences in terms of opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean that we cannot unite and we cannot come to the table and work together. So thank you so much for joining us in our conversation. Thank you, Pando, for joining us in this platform. I hope that one day we see that day where the community is more engaged, and that we are more collaborative, that we are all part of this great Filipino-Canadian community, that everyone is a reflection of our community, and we all should take care of one another. So thanks for watching, and thanks for joining us tonight. Until next time.
thank you. Thanks, Jerry.